Grading beaver is a monumental task. For any given auction, there may be as many as 100,000 pelts. Given that each of these pelts may be handled as much as 8 times, and you get a feel for the enormity of the task faced by the graders. NAFA's beaver graders are highly skilled technicians whose job is to make collections of very uniform pelts. The key word is consistency. It is their job to assure the integrity of the grades. We as shippers often make the mistake of thinking that what we are striving for in putting up and presenting our pelts is to impress and influence the graders. And while this is true, and they will tell you how important the quality of handling is, the ones we also really need to impress are the buyers who actually pay for our pelts. In reality, the grader's job is to categorize the pelts for uniformity and consistency across all the pelts in that grade. The grader tells the buyers what is in each grade. Then the buyer looks at the grade and decides if it will meet his requirements. The buyers are the ones who really look at the quality of the product and how it's handled, and either are willing to pay for it or not. When the pelts arrive at the auction house, a series of numbered tags is generated that matches the number of pelts on the shipper's shipping receipt. This number is specific to each shipper, and his account and those numbers are verified with a count. Any discrepancies are noted in the receiving records and corrected. Each pelt has a tag attached with this individual ID number. It is what is used to track each pelt through the whole grading and sales process and to identify which shipper it belongs to. At this point, the beaver pelts are separated into 2 major sections, Eastern and Western. This is done by junior staff using where they came from as a guide. The dividing lines are between the Minnesota-North Dakota border, south from there, and the Ontario-Manitoba border in the north. As a broad general description, Eastern beaver are darker and heavier. Western beaver are paler in color and a little lighter in weight. These 2 sections are graded separately. Of course, there are always exceptions, and some darker Western beaver fit well into grades of Eastern beaver and vice versa. Those exceptions are addressed later in the grading process, and we will look at any other differences used in grading Western beaver. Next, the pelts are sized. As long as most of us can remember, the fur grader carried his ruler and each pelt was measured first widthwise and then lengthwise, and totaled for the size in 5-inch increments, supers to cubs. All beaver were bought in this country this way, and there were always arguments about measuring the nose. Should you measure at a 45 or should you measure at a straight 90? Nowadays, all sizing is done by computer on a light table. The table measures the square inches and converts it to the grade. Watch closely how the system works and what all is measured. Pay close attention to the panel in the upper right corner. The barcode is scanned, then the pelt placed on the table. The square inches are calculated and converted into size, which is read by the technician and then placed in the proper bin. Meanwhile, all the information is recorded in the shipper's account. We all refer to the process of sorting the beaver as grading, but there are really 3 distinct steps and characteristics of the pelts that are looked at by the graders, and each has a separate term. One exception to this is Western beaver.
When we grade beaver, we're grading the leather first because that's where most of the defects can be found. But after grading the leather, we flip the beaver pelt over and we look at to see whether or not there are any damages or defects to the fur side. The next thing we do after grading the beaver pelt is that we weigh it. And what that does is that we're looking for the density or the resistance of our hand going through the underfur. Basically the 2 weights we're looking for is a heavy beaver as opposed to a semi-heavy beaver. The heavy beavers are primarily used for shearing. They can get more depth to the underfur as opposed to the semi-heavy beaver where they have to have a shorter shear. The last inspection of the fur, what we do is that we color it. And in Eastern beaver we have 3 colors, and in Western beaver we have 4 colors. Do not weigh Western beaver. A Western beaver's underfur is what we call in grading terms mushy. It does not have the strength of the underfur like an Eastern beaver's.
Once the pelts are sized, they are presented leather up and pre-sorted by defects. This is done by the technical staff. They'll make 4 piles based solely on defects in the leather.
The first thing that we're looking for when we grade a beaver pelt are the defects on the leather. These can range from bite marks, sew holes, bullet holes, trap marks, snares, things like that.
First pile are the ones that have no defects, clean skins. This pile includes skins that are fully prime and slaty in color. Second pile are clean but blue skins, Silkys. Third pile are ones that have some very small damage and again, may be prime and are called slights, SLT, and slight damages, both prime and blue. Slight damage is defined as a pelt that has more obvious defects, i.e. scars, small bite marks, open holes, etc. Fourth pile is damaged, pelts both prime and blue. This includes all other pelts. After the initial pre-sort, each of these piles will be gone through separately by a senior grader one at a time, leaving the damages for last. This time through, he will look at the leather again to reaffirm it is the proper grade, reaffirm the size, if any question, then turn the pelt over and look for any rubs in the fur, trap damage, clips, mud, or heavy greases, blood, anything that damages the natural flow of the fur. Hence the importance of cleaning and drumming your fur. According to what he sees for damage or imperfections, these pelts are select or first quality, or they may be moved down to slight or slight damage. Both slight and slight damage grades can be a combination of leather side or fur side defects in the pelt, and depending on the extent of the damage, will either become slights or ones. The next thing the grader looks for is color, and there are 3 colors in Eastern Beaver: extra dark, dark brown, and brown.
When we color Eastern Beaver, we color them into 3 shades, color A, B, C. The A color is the extra dark, the B is dark, and the C color is brown. And when we color beaver, is that we take a middle color, in this case the B color, and anything darker than this color will go into A color. Anything paler than the B color we throw into or put into a C color.
Western beaver are broken out into 5 colors: extra dark, dark, brown, pale, extra pale, and red rims.
The colors in the Western assortment are dark brown, brown, pale, and extra pale. Those colors have a relatively clear flank. There are also beaver with a reddish tone that we pull out. One we call a Clarity 4, which is a slate reddish tone in the flank area, and also what we call a Clarity 8, which is a distinct red rim around the beaver.
These are all broken out in the same time. He is grading for fur side defects. So now he has established 6 piles of graded and damaged by color. At this point, he will also grade for density and depth of the underfur. There are 3 grades of underfur: heavy, semi-heavy, and silky or flat. He'll do this by feeling the density of the fur in the middle of the back to the back of the head. This is the last place to prime up on beaver, and if it's good here, the rest of the pelt will be good.
When rubbing your hand, you take your hand and you go from there to the back of the beaver's ears here, because the last place where beaver primes up is right at the back of the head here. So this is how you weight your beaver.
The grader's years of experience can make this judgment in seconds just by the resistance of the fur he's feeling. Sometimes that line between heavy and semi is pretty fine. When you're handling your pelts, you want to make sure that you're aware of the importance of keeping this area thick and full, as it naturally occurs on the beaver, and as clean as it possibly can be. Don't think for a second that graders aren't concerned with dirty fur. They are.
Negatively, the first thing that we see that catches our attention are poorly handled beaver pelts. And see them with primarily the major problem is mud caked in the fur.
The differences between heavy and semi are very important. One of the more traditional markets for beaver is for shearing. The longer the underfur, the higher it can be sheared. In very cold climates, this length is critical. These heavy grades of beaver always bring the best prices. Except for badly damaged pelts, heavy and semi-heavy grades are suitable for shearing. Silky grades, fall beaver, are not. Most heavy beaver come from the northern states and Canadian provinces. It is not a function of each year's temperatures, but a long-term genetic adaptation. The density of the underfur is in the genetics, and that gene pool is located in northern areas. Semi-heavies are usually from northern Atlantic states across the middle of the U.S. Silkies are usually fall, late spring beaver and southern beaver, and is what is used in most natural beaver garments. For someone new to understanding how their beaver are graded, the process can be very confusing, just because of the process used defining those grades. We have designed the following flowchart to make the process hopefully simpler to follow and understand. The first step in the grading process is separating the pelts into two sections, eastern and western. This is done by where they were harvested. Next, they are broken out into sizes. Then, each size grade is broken into 4 piles according to the condition and primeness of the leather. The first pile, clean and slaty, is made of fully prime and slightly blue or slaty colored leather with no scars or damage. The second pile is blue or early but clean leather with no damage or scars. The third pile is slights and slight damages. This pile is prime leather with imperfections, small holes, and scars. Last is the damaged pelts. In this pile, the damage is very obvious or the imperfections extensive and the leather can be either prime or blue. Now, each pile is gone over again. The clean and slaty pile is checked for fur density or weighed for damage to the fur. Any beaver in this first pile found to have damage or imperfections on the fur side are moved over to either the pile of slight damaged, or over to damage depending on the extent and severity of the damage. If there is no damage, these pelts are put in heavy, semi-heavy, or silky pile, the heavies and semis, and graded as selects or 1. This grade will make up about 15% of the total number of beaver in a collection. The silkies are graded as 1, 2, colored and integrated into the second pile along with the blue clean pelts. The next pile, the blue clean, are now sorted by fur quality. They are not weighed because as silkies, they have no underfur and placed in an appropriate grade. The first grade, if silkies 1, 2, make up about 15 to 18% of the collection. The third pile, slights and slight damages, are now fur side graded and weighed. Any pelts with excessive fur side damage are moved over to the damaged pile. The others will be graded either slights or slight damage depending on the severity of the combination of leather and fur side damage. The slights are weighed, broken out into heavies and semis, and colored. The slight damages are broken into a combination of heavies and semis, and these are graded as shearable, and the rest, which are graded as non-shearable, and then colored. These two grades, slights and slight damages, will make up about 40 to 45% of the collection. The last pile is the damages. These are broken out into 4 grades depending on the severity of the damage. The first, damage 1, is a mix of heavies and semis, and are all shearable quality. This is what is used for making felt, hatters. The second grade is also a mix of heavies and semis, but badly damaged. Some pelts in this grade are also suitable for felt making. The last 2 grades are the poorest quality and have very limited, if any, uses. The damaged grades will make up 25% of the beaver collection, and it is our intent with this DVD to help trappers reduce that to under 10%. Everyone benefits with quality. The western beaver are graded along the same lines as the easterns, and there's usually a pretty even split in the volume of each on any given sale, although the percentage of Section 3 beaver is higher for the westerns. The 2 grading exceptions for western beaver are that they are not weighed or broken out into heavies, semis, or silkies, and there are 5 colors for the westerns: dark brown, brown, pale, extra pale, and red rims. The red rims are then broken out into clarity 4, which is an overall red tone to the fur, and a clarity 8, which is a defined red rim around the pelt. This was a simplified look at the grade designation for a pretty straightforward beaver. So now, let's look at some of the more finite grade breakdowns.